I sat in my freezing Honda Civic at 3 in the morning, wrapped in a thin blanket, when I saw my stepmother posting Instagram photos of their new home gym. The room that used to be mine. While I'm living off energy bars and working double shifts at a diner and retail store to afford community college tuition, my stepfamily is thriving off my inheritance. I didn't know that tomorrow, my wealthy Uncle Marcus would accidentally discover my secret. The gas station bathroom mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my cheekbones looked sharper than they should. I splashed cold water on my face, brushed my teeth with the travel toothbrush I kept in my purse, and changed from my rumpled sleep clothes into my diner uniform. Another day, another 18 hours of work ahead. 2 years ago, everything changed when Dad died. He'd been sick for months, diabetes complications that seemed to spiral out of control despite his careful diet. Patricia, my stepmother, had been so devoted during his illness, constantly cooking his meals and managing his medications. After the funeral, she explained the trust fund Dad had set up for me. Since I was only 23, and Dad worried about my financial maturity, the money would be held until I turned 26. Patricia would manage it, ensuring I had what I needed for school and living expenses. At first, things seemed normal. Patricia and Tyler, her son from her previous marriage, had moved into our family home 6 months before Dad passed. Tyler was a year younger than me, fresh out of high school, and supposedly planning for community college. Patricia said they needed to stay temporarily while she got back on her feet after her divorce. The changes started small. Patricia mentioned that my room had the best natural light for Tyler's computer setup, just until he could afford his own place. She moved my belongings to the basement guest room, promising it was temporary. Then Tyler's gaming equipment expanded, taking over more space. Storage boxes appeared, then exercise equipment Patricia claimed she'd bought to get healthy and honor your father's memory. Gradually, I stopped feeling welcome in my own home. Patricia would forget to buy groceries I liked, saying I was old enough to handle my own shopping. The Wi-Fi password changed without anyone telling me. Tyler's friends treated the house like their personal hangout, leaving messes I was expected to clean. When I asked about accessing my trust fund for college expenses, Patricia sighed and explained how expensive everything was, how she was barely keeping the household afloat. I started working at Mel's Diner to cover my community college costs, then added weekend shifts at Target when textbooks proved more expensive than expected. Patricia seemed pleased that I was learning responsibility and contributing to society. When I mentioned feeling tired all the time, she suggested I find my own place since I was working so much anyway. That was 8 months ago. I'd been sleeping in my car ever since showering at the gym when I could afford the day pass, doing homework in the 24-hour McDonald's, and telling everyone I lived in the dorms. Pride kept me from admitting the truth, and shame made me believe I somehow deserved this. The laundromat was my sanctuary at dawn. For $3, I could wash my uniforms and sit in a warm, bright space for 2 hours. I was folding my clean clothes when someone tapped on the window of my Civic parked outside. Uncle Marcus stood there looking concerned and confused. Dad's younger brother had always been successful in real estate development, traveling frequently for business. He lived 2 states away and visited maybe twice a year, usually calling ahead. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. "Andria, what are you doing here so early?" He glanced at my car, packed with clothes blankets and school supplies. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by horror. "Are you living in your car?" My stomach dropped. "Uncle Marcus, I can explain. It's just temporary while I figure out housing near campus." The lie felt heavy and desperate. He walked around my Honda, taking in the makeshift curtains I'd hung for privacy, the pillow and sleeping bag in the back seat, the cooler that served as my refrigerator. His face grew darker with each detail. How long has this been going on? His voice was quiet, controlled in a way that meant he was furious. Just a few weeks. I lied again. It's really not a big deal. Lots of college students do unconventional housing arrangements. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me something that made my blood freeze. It was Patricia's Instagram from last night, posting pictures of herself using a brand new elliptical machine and weight set. The caption read, "Finally finished my home gym renovation. So blessed to have this space for wellness and self-care. Andria's off living her best college life in the dorms. She told me you were thriving at school, living in the dorms, and doing wonderfully." Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She said you rarely came home because you were so busy with campus life." Shame burned through me. "Uncle Marcus, please don't make this a big thing. I don't want to cause family drama." Family drama. He stared at me. "Andria, where is your trust fund money going? Your father left you enough to cover college and living expenses comfortably." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean? Patricia said college is expensive and the fund barely covers tuition. That's why I work 2 jobs." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. "Show me your bank statements. Show me the trust fund disbursements." "I don't have access to those. Patricia handles everything until I turned 26. Dad set it up that way because he was worried about my financial maturity." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Andria, I need to tell you something. Your trust fund has been paying Patricia's business expenses for the last year and a half. She's been using your inheritance to finance their failing catering company." The world tilted. "What?" "I've been tracking some irregularities because Patricia asked me for investment advice about her business. When I looked into the finances, I saw massive transfers from your trust account. I assumed you knew and approved them." I felt like I was drowning. I had no idea. I thought I was poor because college is expensive. I thought Patricia was helping me by managing the money responsibly. Marcus's jaw clenched. "We're going to the house right now. Patricia has a lot of explaining to do." As we drove toward my childhood home, my mind raced. Everything I thought I understood about my situation was wrong. I wasn't struggling because life was hard. I was struggling because someone who was supposed to protect me was stealing from me. Marcus didn't knock. He used his spare key, the one Dad had given him years ago for emergencies. We walked into the house I'd grown up in, and the sight that greeted us made my heart sink. The living room had been completely redecorated. Gone were Dad's books and family photos, replaced with modern furniture I'd never seen. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see granite countertops that definitely hadn't been there when I lived here. And from upstairs came the rhythmic whirring of exercise equipment. "Patricia," Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the house. She appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in expensive workout clothes, her hair perfectly styled, even at 9 in the morning. When she saw me, her expression flickered between surprise and annoyance. "Marco, what a lovely surprise. And Andria, honey, what are you doing here? Don't you have classes equal?" "We need to talk," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." Patricia descended the stairs with practiced grace, her smile never wavering. "Of course. Let me just finish my workout routine. I was just trying out the new equipment in Andria's old room. Well, I suppose it's the gym now since she moved out." "Moved out," Marcus repeated slowly. "Patricia, where exactly do you think Andria is living?" "In the dorms, obviously. She got accepted to a wonderful program and wanted the full college experience. We were so proud when she decided to live independently." Tyler emerged from the kitchen holding an energy drink and wearing clothes that looked expensive. He was bigger than I remembered, clearly benefiting from regular meals and gym access. "Oh, hey, Andria. Mom, did you tell Uncle Marcus about our new catering contracts? Business is booming?" He grinned with satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Marcus looked between Patricia and Tyler, then at me. "Andria has been living in her car for 8 months because she can't afford housing. She works 2 jobs and survives on energy bars while you post Instagram photos of your home gym renovation." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's smile finally faltered, but only for a second. "That's ridiculous," she said smoothly. "Andria, honey, why would you tell your uncle such a story? We've discussed this. You chose to live independently to learn responsibility. The trust fund pays for your education and essential needs." "What essential needs?" I found my voice, anger finally cutting through the shame. "I haven't received a single dollar from that account. You told me it barely covered tuition." Patricia's laugh was light and dismissive. "Sweetheart, the trust fund pays for this house where your room is always available. It covers utilities, groceries, insurance. Just because you chose to move out doesn't mean we're not providing for you." "She doesn't live here," Marcus said coldly. "Her room is now your personal gym." "Her room is available anytime she wants to come home and stop this rebellious phase," Patricia shot back. "Tyler's equipment can be moved if she decides to be reasonable." Tyler crossed his arms. "Why should I give up my space because Andria wants to play victim? She left. That's her choice." Marcus pulled out his phone. "Patricia, I have documentation of over $60,000 transferred from Andria's trust fund to your catering business in the past 18 months. How do you explain that?" For the first time, Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "Those were loans for business purposes. The catering company provides income that supports this household, which benefits Andria." "Loans require consent from the account holder," Marcus said. "Did Andria approve these transfers?" "The trust fund agreement gives me discretionary authority over disbursements for Andria's welfare until she reaches 26, Patricia replied smoothly. "Supporting the household that provides her housing constitutes welfare spending." She disappeared into Dad's old office and returned with a folder of legal documents. Marcus examined them while my world continued to crumble. "These documents appear legitimate," he said finally. "There is a clause about financial maturity and discretionary authority." Patricia's smile returned triumphant. "Marcus, I understand you're concerned, but everything has been handled properly. Andria is going through a difficult phase, probably grief-related, and she's not thinking clearly. Her father worried about exactly this kind of impulsive behavior. The cruelty of using Dad's concerns about my teenage spending habits to justify this betrayal hit me like a physical blow. However," Marcus continued, his voice dangerously quiet, "I've done some investigating of my own. Patricia, did you disclose to the court that you have a previous bankruptcy and 2 failed businesses when you applied for guardianship?" Patricia's face went pale. "Those were different circumstances. My divorce created financial hardships that weren't my fault." "And did you disclose that your ex-husband filed a police report claiming you embezzled from his construction company?" The room went dead silent. Tyler looked confused, glancing between his mother and Marcus. "Those charges were dropped," Patricia said carefully, "because your ex-husband decided not to pursue prosecution to avoid a lengthy court battle, not because you were innocent." Marcus continued. "I also found it interesting that you specifically researched Andria's father's financial situation before you started dating him. Social media searches, property records, inquiries, very thorough courtship preparation." Patricia's mask was slipping. I don't have to listen to these accusations in my own home. It's not your home, I said quietly. It's mine. Dad left it to me. With me as trustee until you turned 26, Patricia snapped. And there was the first glimpse of her real personality. Which means I decide what's best for this property and your welfare. Marcus stood up. Actually, Patricia, I think we need to involve some attorneys, and possibly the police. The police? Patricia laughed, but it sounded forced. For what, managing a trust fund according to legal documents, supporting a household that provides for Andria's needs? You're being dramatic, Marcus. For fraud, Marcus said simply, because I'm pretty sure Andria's signature was forged on several of those loan documents. Patricia's face went white. Tyler looked genuinely confused now, the first crack in his confident facade. That's a serious accusation, Patricia said slowly. It's also a serious crime, Marcus replied, punishable by several years in prison. Patricia straightened her voice, becoming cold and calculating. Marcus, I think you need to leave. You're clearly upset and not thinking rationally. If you continue to harass us, I'll have no choice but to call the police myself. The threat hung in the air. I realized Patricia was confident in her position, secure in her legal authority, and her ability to manipulate the situation. She'd been planning this for years, and she was prepared for resistance. Marcus looked at me, then back at Patricia. This conversation isn't over. As we left the house, I felt smaller and more powerless than ever. Patricia had legal control, physical control, and the confidence that came from successfully manipulating everyone around her. I was still homeless, still broke, and now I understood exactly how thoroughly I'd been betrayed. But as we sat in Marcus's car, he turned to me with a look I'd never seen before, determination mixed with something that looked almost like excitement. Andria, he said, Patricia made one critical mistake today. What's that? She assumed I've been sitting on my hands for the past few months just watching this happen. He started the car. She has no idea what's coming. Marcus drove us to a small cafe across town, choosing a corner booth where we could talk privately. I wrapped my hands around a hot coffee mug, the first real warmth I'd felt in weeks, and waited for him to explain. I need to tell you something that's going to be hard to hear, he began. I've known something was wrong for months, but I needed proof before I could act. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase, thick with documents and photographs. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator. I stared at him. You did what? Patricia's lifestyle didn't add up. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, spa treatments, frequent shopping trips. Her social media showed constant luxury purchases, but catering businesses typically struggle for the first few years. When I casually asked about her success, her numbers didn't make sense. Marcus opened the folder, revealing a detailed investigation report. Patricia Williams, formerly Patricia Chen, formerly Patricia Martinez. She's been married 4 times, Andria. Not twice like she told your father. My coffee went cold in my hands. 4 times. Her first husband, David Martinez, owned a small construction company in Nevada. 6 months after they married, the business went bankrupt. David claimed Patricia had been forging his signature on business loans, but by the time he figured it out, she disappeared with most of the remaining assets. Marcus flipped through pages of documents. Husband number 2, Robert Chen, ran a successful restaurant chain. Same pattern. Patricia gained access to business accounts, slowly drained them over 18 months, then filed for divorce, claiming emotional abuse. She walked away with half his remaining assets in the settlement. I felt sick. And husband number 3, Tyler's biological father, James Williams. Here's where it gets complicated. Marcus pulled out a missing person report. Tyler was actually abducted from a park in Oregon when he was 7 years old. His real name is Christopher Williams. The world stopped. Tyler is kidnapped. Patricia wasn't his mother. She was James Williams's girlfriend who fled with his son after stealing his identity and business funds. Tyler doesn't remember his real family because Patricia convinced him his father abandoned them. She's been his captor for over 10 years, but he's experienced Stockholm Syndrome. My mind reeled. Tyler wasn't just Patricia's son caught up in her schemes. He was another victim brainwashed into loyalty. James Williams killed himself 2 years after his son disappeared. Marcus continued quietly. The police investigation went cold, but Christopher's maternal grandparents never stopped looking for him. I stared at Tyler's school photos in the file, comparing them to pictures of the missing boy. The resemblance was unmistakable. How did she meet my dad? Marcus turned more pages. Patricia researched wealthy widowers in our area through online obituaries and social media. She specifically targeted men with adult children looking for complicated inheritance situations she could exploit. Your father's business success and your age made him a perfect mark. The methodical nature of her predation made me feel nauseous. She planned everything, including his death, Marcus said quietly. I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered against the table, hot liquid splashing everywhere. What did you say? Marcus carefully cleaned up the mess while choosing his words. Your father's diabetes was well controlled for years. His doctor notes show excellent management up until the last 6 months of his life. Then suddenly, his blood sugar became erratic. He handed me medical records I'd never seen. Patricia was managing his meals and medications during his illness. She insisted on doing everything herself said. She wanted to take care of him personally. You think she poisoned him? I think she systematically sabotaged his diabetes management. Small changes in meal timing, subtle increases in sugar content, occasionally forgetting to give him his insulin. Nothing that would be obvious, but enough to create the complications that killed him. The grief and rage hit me simultaneously. Dad hadn't died from natural disease progression. He'd been murdered slowly, carefully by someone he trusted completely. The police won't investigate without hard evidence, Marcus continued. But the pattern is clear. Patricia targets vulnerable men, gains their trust, systematically steals their assets, then eliminates them when they're no longer useful. I thought about Dad's last months, how devoted Patricia had seemed, how she'd insisted on handling everything herself, how she'd cried so convincingly at his funeral while simultaneously filing guardianship papers to control my inheritance. There's more, Marcus said gently. The catering business is completely fake. Patricia has been using Tyler to create false client testimonials and fake bookings. Most of the equipment was purchased with your trust fund money and sits unused in a storage unit. The actual food orders are minimal, just enough to maintain the facade. He showed me financial records proving that 90% of the catering income was actually my inheritance money being laundered through fake business accounts. She's stolen almost everything, I whispered. Not quite everything, and she's made critical mistakes. Marcus's expression hardened. The forgery on those loan documents was sloppy. More importantly, she's been so confident in her legal protection that she's kept detailed records of everything. She never expected anyone to investigate. I felt the first spark of hope I'd had in months. What can we do? We're going to stop her, but it requires you to do something dangerous. Marcus leaned forward. You have to go back. Back to the house. You need to return, apologize to Patricia, convince her you've realized I was wrong and that you're grateful for her care. Then, while she thinks she's won, you gather evidence. The thought of facing Patricia again, of pretending gratitude, while knowing what she'd done to Dad, made me want to vomit. I can't do that. I can't pretend to forgive her. Andria, she's planning to disappear. My investigator found evidence that she's already contacted a realtor about selling the house. She has a moving truck reserved for next week. If she runs, we'll never recover your inheritance or get justice for your father. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a text exchange he'd intercepted. Patricia was communicating with someone about liquidating remaining assets and relocating before any complications arise. She knows I'm suspicious now. She's accelerating her timeline. This is our last chance. I thought about Dad, about Tyler trapped in a life of lies, about my inheritance disappearing forever. I thought about sleeping in my car while Patricia posted Instagram photos of her luxury lifestyle funded by my father's death. What exactly do you need me to do? Marcus outlined the plan. I would return to the house that evening, claim that his accusations had made me realize how ungrateful I'd been. I'd apologize for causing drama and ask to come home. Once Patricia believed she'd manipulated me again, I'd secretly record her admitting to the fraud. She's narcissistic enough that she'll want to gloat, Marcus explained, especially if she thinks she's convinced you that you deserved the treatment you received. He handed me a small recording device disguised as a pen. Get her to admit to the business fraud, the forged signatures, anything that proves criminal intent. But Andria, if she becomes suspicious or threatens you in any way, get out immediately. Patricia is dangerous. As we drove back toward town, I realized this was the first time in 2 years that I had an ally, someone who believed me and was willing to fight for justice. The plan was terrifying, but the alternative was watching Patricia destroy what remained of my family and disappear unpunished. It was time to stop being a victim and start fighting back. That evening, I sat in my car outside the house for 20 minutes, gathering courage. The recording pen felt heavy in my pocket, and my hands shook as I practiced the apology I'd rehearsed with Marcus. Everything depended on convincing Patricia that I was broken, grateful, and completely under her control again. I knocked on the door instead of using my old key, a gesture of submission that would appeal to Patricia's need for dominance. Tyler answered, his expression shifting from surprise to smug satisfaction. "Well, look who's back," he said loudly enough for Patricia to hear. "Did Uncle Marcus finally tell you how dramatic you've been?" Patricia appeared behind him, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp with calculation. "Andria, sweetie, what brings you home?" "And Chancel, I owe you an apology," I said, letting my voice crack slightly. Marcus got into my head with all those accusations, but when I really thought about everything, I realized how ungrateful I've been. Patricia's expression softened just a fraction, but I could see her mind working, evaluating whether my submission was genuine. "Come in, honey, let's talk." The house felt different now that I knew the truth about how it was furnished. Every piece of expensive furniture represented my father's blood money, every luxury item purchased with my stolen inheritance. Patricia guided me to the living room, positioning herself where she could study my face. "I understand that you're grieving, and grief can make us irrational. Your father worried about this, you know. He said you had a tendency toward dramatic thinking when you were upset." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. She was already rewriting history, making Dad complicit in her abuse. "I know," I said, forcing myself to nod. "I shouldn't have let Marcus poison me against you. You've been taking care of everything, managing the trust fund, keeping the house running. I was being selfish." "It hasn't been easy," Patricia said, her tone becoming maternal and slightly martyred. "Raising Tyler, managing your father's estate, trying to build a business, to secure our family's future. When you disappeared without explanation, it broke my heart. Tyler sat on the arm of Patricia's chair, presenting a united front. Mom was worried sick. She kept saying you'd come to your senses eventually. I should have appreciated everything you've done, I continued, working so hard to build the catering business, maintaining this beautiful home. I was just overwhelmed with school and work. Patricia's smile became more genuine, her guard dropping slightly. The catering business has been challenging, but it's finally taking off. We just booked 3 major events for next month. This was the opening I needed. That's wonderful. Marcus made it sound like you were struggling, but obviously, he doesn't understand business. Marcus sees numbers on paper and thinks he understands the full picture, Patricia said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. He doesn't realize that building a successful catering company requires significant upfront investment. The equipment alone costs nearly $40,000. I knew from Marcus's investigation that the equipment mostly sat unused in storage, but I nodded admiringly. That's such a smart investment. Dad would be so proud of how you've grown the business. Patricia's eyes lit up with narcissistic pleasure. Your father always said I had excellent business instincts. He trusted my judgment completely. The trust fund arrangement really shows how much he believed in you, I said carefully. I'm sorry I questioned your decisions about the loans to the business. Tyler looked confused. What loans? Patricia shot him a warning look, but she was too pleased with my apparent capitulation to be cautious. The trust fund allows for investment in family business ventures that provide long-term security. It's actually quite clever financial planning. I never understood business before, I said. Could you explain how it works? I want to learn. Patricia launched into a detailed explanation of how she'd structured the loans to maximize business growth while maintaining legal compliance with the trust fund requirements. As she spoke, I realized she genuinely believed her own justifications. She'd convinced herself that stealing my inheritance was sophisticated financial management. Of course, sometimes the paperwork requirements are tedious, she continued. All those signatures for disbursement requests, but it's necessary to maintain proper documentation. You've had to handle all that paperwork yourself, I asked sympathetically. Every single document. The trust fund administrators are very particular about signatures and authorization forms. Patricia's voice carried a note of pride. I've become quite expert at navigating the bureaucracy. Tyler suddenly perked up. Mom, remember when you had to practice Andria's signature like 20 times to get it exactly right? The room went silent. Patricia's face drained of color, and I felt the recording pen burning in my pocket. Tyler, Patricia said quietly, you're confused. I never practiced anyone's signature. But Tyler, oblivious to his mistake, continued enthusiastically. Yeah, you did remember. You had that old birthday card from Andria, and you kept copying it until you could make it look exactly the same. You said it was for some legal thing about the trust fund. I kept my expression carefully neutral, but inside I was screaming with triumph. Tyler had just confessed to witness Patricia practicing forgery. Tyler's thinking of something else, Patricia said quickly. Perhaps homework I was helping him with. I don't think so, Tyler argued. It was definitely Andria's name, because you kept saying how she makes that weird loop in the A, and you had to get it perfect, or the bank people would notice. Patricia stood up abruptly. Tyler, go upstairs, now. But Mom, I was just... Now. Tyler left, confused and slightly hurt by his mother's sharp tone. Patricia turned back to me, and I saw something dangerous flickering in her eyes. Tyler sometimes misremembers things, she said carefully. He gets confused about timelines. Of course, when I said quickly. Teenagers mix things up all the time. but I could see Patricia studying my face, looking for any sign that I'd understood the significance of Tyler's words. I forced myself to look genuinely confused, as if forgery hadn't even occurred to me. "I should probably head back to campus," I said, "but I'm so glad we talked. I feel much better about everything." "Where exactly are you staying, Andria?" Patricia asked suddenly. "You mentioned the dorms, but which residence hall?" My heart stopped. I'd never mentioned staying in dorms during tonight's conversation, but Patricia was clearly testing whether my story was consistent. Morrison Hall. I lied, naming a building I'd seen on campus. "And your room number?" 314, I said, picking a random number. Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you're settled somewhere safe. I worry about you, you know." As I headed toward the door, Patricia called out casually, "Oh, Andria, leave your purse here for a minute. I want to give you some leftover food to take back to your dorm." My blood turned to ice. She wanted to search my purse. She suspected something. "That's okay," I said quickly. "I just ate and I have a big meal plan at school." "I insist," Patricia said, and her voice had taken on a steel edge that reminded me of all the subtle threats from the past 2 years. I had no choice. I handed over my purse, praying she wouldn't find the recording pen. Patricia took it to the kitchen, and I heard her moving things around, clearly searching through my belongings. When she returned, her smile was back, but something had fundamentally shifted in the atmosphere. "Here you go, sweetie. I didn't find anything good enough to send with you after all." She handed back my purse, but I knew she'd found something. Maybe not the pen, but something had confirmed her suspicions. As I walked to my car, every step felt like a potential trap. I drove 3 blocks before pulling over and checking my purse with shaking hands. The recording pen was still there, but my old student ID from last semester was missing. Patricia had taken it, and I suddenly understood why. She was going to verify my story about Morrison Hall, and when she discovered I'd lied, she'd know I was working against her. I had maybe 12 hours before Patricia realized I was gathering evidence. 12 hours to get enough proof to stop her before she disappeared forever. The race was on. I called Marcus immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. "She's on to me," I said the moment he answered. Patricia searched my purse and took my student ID. "She's going to check my story about the dorms." "Are you safe right now?" "I think so. I'm 3 blocks away from the house." "Go to the address I'm texting you. It's a safe house I've arranged. We need to move fast." The safe house turned out to be a small apartment Marcus had rented under a false name. Inside, I found surveillance equipment, computers, and walls covered with investigation materials. Marcus had been preparing for this confrontation far longer than I'd realized. "We're accelerating everything," he said grimly. "Patricia will discover you lied within hours. Once she does, she'll either run or become dangerous." He handed me a new recording device, smaller and more sophisticated than the pen. "This one has GPS tracking and remote activation. I can monitor everything from here." "What if she searches me again?" "She won't get the chance. You're not going back inside the house." I stared at him. "Then how do we get evidence?" Marcus pulled up live surveillance footage on his laptop. "I've had cameras installed around the property for weeks. But more importantly, I've been monitoring Patricia's communications." The screen showed text messages Patricia was sending to an unknown number. "The girl is suspicious. May need to accelerate timeline. Confirm asset liquidation status." Who is she texting? Someone who's been helping her move money offshore. Probably a contact from one of her previous schemes. Marcus enhanced another message thread. "Look at this." The messages from earlier that week showed Patricia had already transferred most of my remaining trust fund to accounts in the Cayman Islands. She'd been planning to disappear for months. She's not just stealing my inheritance, I realized. She's been planning to abandon Tyler. Marcus nodded grimly. Tyler is a liability now. He's old enough to start asking questions, and his memories of his real family might be returning. Patricia's getting ready to cut all ties and start over somewhere new. On the surveillance monitor, we watched Tyler leaving the house carrying a large duffel bag. He looked around nervously before getting into Patricia's car. "Where are they going?" I asked. Marcus was already tracing the car's GPS. "Storage unit across town. She's probably retrieving the catering equipment to sell it." This was our chance. While Patricia was distracted with liquidating assets, we could search the house for evidence. Marcus had keys and alarm codes from his surveillance operation. "This is breaking and entering," I said. "It's your house," Marcus replied. "You're not breaking in. You're collecting your own property." We drove separately, using back roads to avoid being seen. The house felt different, entering it secretly, like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. Marcus went straight to Dad's old office, while I headed upstairs to search Patricia's bedroom. Her computer was password protected, but she'd left handwritten notes scattered across her desk. Phone numbers, account information, travel confirmations. She was planning to leave the country in 3 days. In her dresser drawer, I found a folder labeled Emergency Documents. Inside were multiple sets of identification with Patricia's photo, but different names. She'd been preparing new identities for years. But the most damning evidence was a handwritten journal hidden beneath her mattress. Patricia had documented everything, apparently believing she'd never be caught. The entries were chilling in their casual tone. Day 43 increased Richard's dinner carb portions by 15%. Blood sugar readings becoming more erratic. Patience required. Day 67 forgot evening insulin dose. Richard hospitalized, but doctors attribute to stress. Excellent cover story. Day 91, Richard too weak to check medication timing himself. Full control achieved. She'd murdered my father with methodical precision, documenting each step like a science experiment. I photographed every page with trembling hands, barely able to read her clinical descriptions of Dad's suffering. She'd enjoyed watching him die. From downstairs, I heard Marcus calling urgently. "Andria, they're coming back." I shoved the journal into my jacket and ran downstairs. Marcus was grabbing files from Dad's office, his face pale with panic. "They left the storage unit early, ETA 3 minutes. We ran for the back door, but as we reached the kitchen, headlights swept across the front windows. Patricia's car was already in the driveway. "Basement," Marcus whispered. "There's a window we can crawl through." But as we reached the basement stairs, we heard the front door open and Patricia's voice angry and suspicious. "Someone's been in the house. The alarm was disabled." Tyler's voice confused. "Maybe you forgot to set it." "I never forget. Someone's here." We were trapped. The basement window was too small, and Patricia would search the house systematically. Marcus pushed me behind the water heater and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police," he whispered. "With what evidence we broke into her house illegally?" "With the journal you just found and the confession I've been recording." I stared at him. "Recording?" Marcus showed me his phone screen. He'd been live streaming everything to a secure server, including my discovery of Patricia's murder journal. Upstairs, Patricia's voice was getting closer. "Tyler, check the office. Someone went through the desk." "Mom, you're being paranoid." "Don't call me Mom right now. Check the damn office." We heard Tyler's footsteps in Dad's office, then his voice. "Some files are missing, and the computer's been moved." A moment of silence, then Patricia screaming, "That little bitch, she was here." Her footsteps thundered across the floor above us, and I heard her making phone calls. "Change of plans. We leave tonight. Yes, tonight. Everything's compromised." Then Tyler's voice sounding different, confused. "Mom, why did you call me Tyler just now? You said, "Don't call me Mom." Why would you say that? Another silence, longer this time. Tyler, we need to pack immediately. We're taking a vacation. What about school? What about my friends? Forget about school. We're starting over somewhere new. Tyler's voice was changing, becoming uncertain. Starting over. But this is our home. And what happened to Andria? She was supposed to be in the dorms, but you acted like she was lying. Tyler, stop asking questions and go pack, now. My name isn't Tyler, he said quietly. Is it? The silence that followed was deafening. Then Patricia's voice, cold and calculating. Pack your things. We're leaving in 1 hour. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the truth about who I am. The explosion of sound from upstairs made me jump. Furniture being thrown, Patricia screaming, Tyler yelling back. The fight escalated quickly with crashes and the sound of things breaking. Then Tyler's voice panicked. Mom, stop, you're scaring me. Patricia's response was chilling. I am not your mother. I never was. Your real family didn't want you anyway. The psychological abuse was happening in real time, and Tyler was finally seeing Patricia's true nature. But instead of compliance, his voice grew stronger. Then let me go. If you're not my mother and my real family didn't want me, just let me leave. You know too much now, Patricia said, and something in her tone made my blood freeze. You can't leave. Marcus was already on the phone with 911, whispering our location and the emergency situation. But Patricia was getting desperate, and desperate people did unpredictable things. The fight upstairs intensified, and we heard Tyler scream in genuine fear. Without thinking, I ran up the basement stairs, Marcus close behind me. We burst into the living room to find Patricia holding a kitchen knife, backing Tyler against the wall. Her face was transformed with rage, barely recognizable as the manipulative woman who'd played victim so convincingly. Patricia, drop the knife, Marcus commanded. She spun toward us, the blade reflecting the overhead lights. You destroyed everything. Years of work ruined because you couldn't mind your own business. Tyler used her distraction to run toward us, his face streaked with tears and terror. She's not my mom, he said desperately. She told me my real parents were dead, but she's been lying about everything. Patricia's laugh was bitter and unhinged. Your real parents gave up looking for you years ago, Christopher. They moved on, had other children. You think they want you back after all this time? The cruelty was designed to break him, but Tyler straightened his shoulders. My name is Christopher. Your name is whatever I say it is, Patricia snarled. Just like Andria's trust fund belongs to whoever is smart enough to take it. She was confessing everything in her rage, but she was also completely unhinged. The knife trembled in her hand as she looked between the three of us. You want to know the truth? She continued, her voice rising to a shriek. I killed Richard slowly and painfully because he was stupid enough to trust me. I stole Christopher from his family because I needed a cover story. And I've been bleeding Andria's trust fund dry because she was too naive to stop me. Marcus's phone was still recording everything. Patricia had just confessed to murder, kidnapping, and fraud while threatening us with a weapon. But none of that matters now, she said, advancing toward me with the knife, because witnesses are just another problem to solve. The sound of police sirens in the distance made her freeze. Marcus's emergency call had worked, but Patricia's eyes showed she had nothing left to lose. She lunged toward me with the knife, and everything slowed down. Marcus pushed me aside, taking the blade across his forearm. Tyler tackled Patricia from behind, and all three of them crashed into Dad's old bookshelf. By the time the police burst through the front door, Patricia was subdued, but still screaming threats. The knife was secured. Marcus's arm was bleeding, but not severely injured, and Tyler was holding me while we both shook with adrenaline. Patricia's careful facade had finally cracked completely, revealing the predator she'd always been underneath. The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of police statements, medical attention for Marcus's arm, and the beginning of the most complex investigation our local police department had ever handled. Patricia was arrested on charges of assault with a deadly weapon, but that was just the beginning. Tyler sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at a missing person poster the police had shown him. Christopher Williams, age 7, disappeared from Riverside Park in Portland, Oregon. The photo showed a gap-toothed smile and eyes that were unmistakably the same as the young man beside me. "I remember the park," he said quietly. "There was a duck pond, and my dad was teaching me to skip stones. A lady said my mom was hurt and needed me to come with her right away." Detective Sarah Chen had been working missing persons cases for 15 years, but she'd never had a kidnapping victim recovered after so long. "Christopher, we've contacted your biological family. Your father passed away 3 years ago, but your grandparents and your father's brother are still alive. They never stopped looking for you." Christopher Tyler started to cry. 11 years of lies were unraveling, and the truth was both liberating and terrifying. Marcus emerged from the emergency room with 12 stitches and a determination to see Patricia prosecuted for every crime she'd committed. The recording from the house contained clear confessions to murder, kidnapping, and fraud. "The district attorney wants to meet with us tomorrow," Detective Chen continued. "Patricia's case is going to be complicated because it crosses multiple state lines and involves federal crimes." Over the next week, the full scope of Patricia's crimes became clear. The FBI got involved when they discovered she'd been using multiple identities and had victims in 6 different states. Christopher's case reopened cold case investigations across the Pacific Northwest. The hardest part was watching Christopher struggle with his identity. He'd spent his teenage years believing Tyler Williams was his real name, that Patricia was his loving mother, and that his biological family had abandoned him. Learning that everything was a lie created a psychological crisis that required intensive therapy. "I keep expecting to wake up and have this all be a nightmare," he told me one afternoon. We were sitting in the victim services office, waiting for another meeting with lawyers. For 11 years, she was my whole world. Even when she was cruel, she was all I had. "That's called Stockholm Syndrome," the therapist explained. "It's common in long-term captivity situations. Your feelings toward Patricia are complicated because she was both your captor and your primary caregiver. Those conflicted emotions are normal." Meanwhile, the investigation into my father's death had been reopened as a homicide case. Patricia's journal provided a detailed confession, but proving murder through diabetes manipulation was challenging. The medical examiner had to exhume Dad's body for additional testing, a process that was both necessary and traumatic. The financial investigation revealed the full extent of Patricia's theft. Over $200,000 had been stolen from my trust fund, but much of it could be recovered. Patricia had kept meticulous records, apparently believing her legal guardianship made her untouchable. She was almost right, the forensic accountant explained. If she'd been more careful about the forgery and hadn't documented the murder, she might have gotten away with everything. Patricia's narcissism had been her downfall. She couldn't resist keeping records of her clever manipulations, documenting her crimes like trophies. The most surprising development came 3 weeks after Patricia's arrest. Detective Chen called me with news that would change everything again. "Andria, we need you to come to the station. There's someone here who wants to meet you." At the police station, I met Elena Rodriguez, a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. She looked familiar in a way I couldn't place. Andria, I'm your father's sister. The world stopped. My father was an only child. That's what he believed, Elena said gently. We were separated when I was 3 and he was 5. Our parents died in a car accident, and we were placed in different foster families. I've been searching for him my entire adult life. Elena was a successful attorney in California who specialized in family law. She'd hired investigators to find her brother for 30 years, finally tracking him down just months after his death. I was devastated to learn Richard had passed away, but then I discovered he had a daughter. I've been trying to find you for 2 years, but Patricia had hidden you so thoroughly. The resemblance was unmistakable once I knew to look for it. Elena had Dad's eyes, his smile, his way of tilting her head when she listened carefully. When I heard about the criminal investigation, I knew I had to come forward. You're my only family. Andria and I want to help however I can. Elena's resources and legal expertise transformed our case against Patricia. She coordinated with the prosecutor's office, helped recover hidden assets, and provided the emotional support I'd been missing for 2 years. Your father tried to contact me before he died, Elena revealed. He left voicemails saying he was worried about Patricia's intentions, that something felt wrong. I was out of the country on a case and didn't get the messages until after his funeral. If Elena had received Dad's call, everything might have been different. But dwelling on what might have been wouldn't bring him back or undo the damage Patricia had caused. Christopher's reunion with his biological family was both beautiful and heartbreaking. His paternal uncle, David Williams, flew out from Oregon immediately. The recognition was instant and overwhelming. You look exactly like your father at 18, David cried, hugging Christopher for the first time in 11 years. We never gave up hope. Never. Christopher's grandparents, both in their 70s, wept when they saw him via video call. They'd spent their retirement years funding search efforts and maintaining a bedroom in their house for the grandson they prayed would come home. The psychological healing would take time, but Christopher was surrounded by family who loved him and professionals who understood his unique trauma. 6 months later, Patricia Williams, Patricia Chen, Patricia Martinez, and 2 other aliases were sentenced to 25 years to life in federal prison. The charges included murder, kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. Her other victims came forward during the trial, revealing a pattern of predatory behavior spanning 2 decades. Christopher chose to keep the name Tyler as his middle name, honoring the survival instincts that had kept him alive during his captivity. He was starting college in Oregon, living with his uncle David, and rebuilding relationships with his extended family. Elena convinced me to transfer to Stanford Law School, where she had connections and influence. My trust fund, now recovered and properly managed, covered full tuition and living expenses. For the first time since Dad's death, I had genuine family support. But the most meaningful development was our decision to transform Dad's house into a resource center for young adults escaping family abuse and human trafficking. Elena helped establish the legal framework, while Christopher contributed his experience to help other survivors. The Richard Rodriguez Center for Family Justice opened 1 year after Patricia's conviction. The first residents were 3 teenagers who'd aged out of foster care and a 20-year-old woman escaping forced marriage. Standing in Dad's old office, now converted to a counseling center, I felt his presence in a way I hadn't since his death. Patricia had tried to destroy our family, but her crimes had ultimately led to discovering Elena and creating something meaningful from our pain. Justice had been served, family had been found, and the future finally held promise instead of fear. 2 years later, I stood before a graduating class of law students delivering the commencement speech at Stanford Law School. In the audience, I could see Elena beaming with pride, Christopher, now using his full name, Christopher Tyler Williams, grinning widely, Uncle Marcus with his arm in a proud gesture, and 15 residents from the Richard Rodriguez Center who had driven down to watch. When I was 25, I lived in my car while working 2 jobs to pay for community college, I began. I thought I was poor because life was hard. I thought I deserved the treatment I received because I wasn't grateful enough for what I had. I thought family meant accepting whatever those closest to you chose to do, even when it hurt. The audience of new lawyers listened intently as I shared the condensed version of my story, how apparent powerlessness had hidden inner strength, how the darkest period of my life had led to discovering family I never knew existed. The woman who stole my inheritance, murdered my father, and kidnapped my friend believed she was smarter than everyone around her. She documented her crimes because she was proud of her manipulation skills. Her narcissism became her downfall, but it taught me something crucial about justice. I looked out at the bright faces of new attorneys, soon to enter a profession where they would encounter both victims and predators. Justice isn't just punishment for wrongdoing. Justice is restoration. Justice is using your experience to prevent others from suffering the same harm. Justice is building something meaningful from your pain. After the ceremony, we gathered at the Richard Rodriguez Center for a celebration dinner. The house that had once been the site of psychological torture was now filled with laughter, hope, and healing. Christopher had graduated from University of Oregon with a degree in social work, specializing in missing children cases. He worked with law enforcement across the Pacific Northwest, using his unique perspective to help other trafficking victims. His biological family had embraced his chosen profession, supporting his mission to help children the way he wished someone had helped him. I still have nightmares sometimes, he told the newest center resident, a 19-year-old named Marcus, who'd escaped a similar guardianship abuse situation. But they get better with time and therapy. And now, when I have those dreams, I wake up knowing I'm safe and surrounded by people who actually care about me. Uncle Marcus had become the center's financial advisor, an unofficial grandfather figure to the residents. His business success had given him the resources to support our mission, but more importantly, his experience investigating Patricia had led to a second career, helping other families navigate financial abuse situations. Elena had relocated her law practice to California, specifically to work on family justice cases. She'd successfully prosecuted 12 other predators who targeted vulnerable family members using the legal strategies we developed during Patricia's case. Your father would be so proud, she told me that evening as we walked through the center's garden, not just of your success, but of how you've used your experience to help others. The garden was Christopher's project, a space where residents could grow their own food and experience the therapeutic benefits of nurturing life. He'd planted a memorial rose bush for Dad, which bloomed magnificently every spring. I never got to meet your dad, Christopher said, joining our conversation. But I feel like I know him through the way you and Elena talk about him, and through this place. He raised someone who could survive what Patricia did and come out fighting for other people. That night, I received a letter from Patricia in prison. It was her first communication since her conviction, and I debated whether to read it. Finally, curiosity won. The letter was exactly what I expected. No genuine remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, just manipulation disguised as apology. She claimed to have found religion, said she prayed for my forgiveness, and suggested that she'd actually helped me by teaching me strength through adversity. I showed the letter to Elena, who shook her head in familiar frustration. Classic narcissistic personality disorder. Even in prison, she can't accept that she was wrong. It doesn't matter, I realized. Her opinion of her actions doesn't change the reality of what she did or the justice she received. I threw the letter away without responding. Patricia no longer had any power over my emotions or my future. The most profound realization came 6 months later when Marcus, the center resident, not my uncle, graduated from our program and moved into his own apartment. At his farewell dinner, he said something that crystallized everything I'd learned. When I first got here, I kept waiting for you all to show your true colors, to start manipulating me or demanding something in return for help. I couldn't believe people would actually care about my well-being without wanting something from me. He paused, emotional, but determined to continue. It took me months to understand that this is what real family feels like. Not people who claim to love you while they hurt you, but people who show love through consistent actions and respect for your autonomy. That was it. The core lesson Patricia had inadvertently taught us all. Real family isn't about blood relations or legal documents or who has authority over whom. Real family is about people who consistently choose your well-being, who support your growth, who celebrate your success without jealousy. Dad had been real family, Uncle Marcus, Elena, Christopher, and even the residents who came through our center had become real family. Patricia had never been family at all, despite the marriage certificate and legal guardianship. She'd been a predator wearing the mask of family. The evening before the 3rd anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave with Elena and Christopher. Instead of the grief and anger that had characterized previous visits, I felt peaceful gratitude. I used to come here feeling guilty that I hadn't protected him, I told them. Now I come here feeling grateful that he raised me with enough strength to survive and eventually fight back. Elena placed fresh flowers on the headstone. Your father's greatest achievement wasn't his business success or financial accomplishments. It was raising a daughter who could transform tragedy into purpose. Christopher added a small stone he'd carried from Oregon, a tradition from his biological family. He saved me too, in a way. If he hadn't had the foresight to worry about Patricia's motives, if he hadn't tried to contact Elena, we might never have uncovered the truth. As we left the cemetery, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. 3 years ago, I'd been sleeping in my car, convinced I was worthless and powerless. Now I was a practicing attorney, specializing in family justice, surrounded by chosen family, running a successful nonprofit, and using my experience to help other survivors. Patricia had tried to destroy me, but had accidentally revealed my strength. She'd isolated me from family, but led to me discovering relatives I'd never known. She'd stolen my financial security, but taught me that real wealth comes from meaningful relationships and purposeful work. The final validation came when Christopher called me 6 months later with incredible news. His work with missing children had led to the recovery of 8 other kidnapping victims, including a girl who'd been missing for 13 years. We broke up an entire trafficking ring, he said, his voice filled with exhausted satisfaction. 15 children are going home to their real families. That night, I sat in Dad's old chair in the center's living room, watching our current residents work on homework share meals and support each other through their healing journeys. The sound of genuine laughter filled the house, where Patricia had once enforced silence and fear. I thought about the question I would ask viewers who might be watching this story unfold, the question that had driven everything we'd built. How do you tell the difference between people who genuinely care about your well-being and people who are using your vulnerability against you? How do you find the courage to seek help when the people who should protect you are the ones causing harm? And most importantly, how do you rebuild trust in family and relationships after experiencing such profound betrayal? The answers weren't simple, but they started with understanding that seeking help isn't weakness. It's the first step toward justice. Real strength comes from building meaningful connections with people who prove their trustworthiness through consistent actions, and sometimes losing everything you thought was your family is necessary to discover the people who will become your real family. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in any part of my story, please know that you deserve better. You deserve family who celebrates your success, supports your dreams, and respects your autonomy. You deserve financial security that isn't used as a tool for control. You deserve to live without fear of the people who claim to love you. Seek help. Document everything. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And remember that justice isn't just about punishment for those who hurt you. Justice is building a life so meaningful and full of genuine love that their attempts to destroy you become irrelevant. Your story doesn't end with their betrayal. That's just the chapter where you discover how strong you really are. I want to thank everyone who watched this story and stayed with me through every twist and turn. Your engagement and support mean everything to survivors like me, who are working to prevent these crimes from happening to others. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Like this video to help it reach more people who could benefit from knowing they're not alone. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and justice. And most importantly, comment below with your thoughts about family justice and healing. Your perspectives and experiences matter, and they help build the community of support that makes recovery possible. May you find the courage to seek the justice you deserve and the wisdom to build the family you need. And may you always remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the love and purpose you choose to create in the world.